So, hello guys. Welcome to the first episode of The Elevator, the Elevate AAPI podcast. I'm Charlize Ngol, and my pronouns are she and her, and I am an IVC student, second year, majoring in communications. Nice to meet y'all.
Hey guys, I'm James Aranda. My pronouns are he and him. I'm a fourth year here at IVC. I was a nursing major, but I switched to a computer science major. My favorite video games are League of Legends and COD, and I love playing basketball.
Hello everybody, my name is Elle Dunham. My pronouns are she, her, and they, and I am a second year at IVC student. My major right now is kind of economics, sort of, we'll see. And I'm getting really into Among Us lately, and I'm really into animation.
All right. Hello, gang. Eddie Johnson here, Professor of Communication Studies, Project Director for the Elevate AAPI at IVC and a PZ program at IVC. Glad to be here, chit-chatting and communicating with you all and hanging out with students. And, it's my spare time. When time permits, I'll, play on my 6-string guitar, acoustic electric when I get a chance. Do some twiddling on a piano when I can, or I will play Super Mario Brothers fill in the blank with my son, and that's what I do.
Nice.
Yeah.
What I would love to know is, you three are already taking synchronous and asynchronous courses. So what are some of the best practices that you've either seen or you wish you would see in your classes, whether it's asynchronous as well as synchronous?
Okay, well, I right now have pretty much all asynchronous classes and one synchronous, and I do not like the asynchronous model at all because I need human interaction. I need physical first-person engagement and discussions and things like that. I need to be able to yell at somebody if I disagree with something. Not actually yell, but it's been really hard to not have that in class environment. But some of my classes has been doing pretty well at doing the asynchronous thing. My psychology professor in general, he's used to teaching online classes, so he already has this sort of podcasting model for how he does his lectures. First of all, we have every week we have a chapter reading. So and then on Monday in the afternoon, there's a quiz, which is just actually no, not a quiz. Actually, it's called it's sort of a quiz, but it's like a brain dump. So basically, it's a brain dump that's open only for an hour before noon. And it says basically literally just brain dump everything you remember from that chapter. And then also do that afternoon, you make a discussion document where you make up practice test questions for that chapter. And it has to be, they're all multiple choice, but he encourages you to have a variety of different types of multiple choice answers, like define this based off of these descriptions, or based on these descriptions, match the term kind of thing. What's the difference kind of questions. And that's actually been kind of fun to do, even though sometimes I've been leaving it to the last minute on some of them. It kind of forces you to be engaged no matter what, because you have to make it a good practice test, even if it's just literally matches to this. And it helps you get used to identifying things and comparing them to each other, and it's been really helpful. And also he's made making flashcards a requirement as well. But the flashcards are only due every test, so you get 8 weeks to finish them, but you have to do 100 flashcards. And I know it sounds like a lot, but if you do them on PowerPoint, so each flashcard is one slide for a definition or for the word or thing, and the second slide is the explanation and definition. So if you just do them alongside the notes each week, like 10 or 12 each time, then you can get it done pretty easily. And I also kind of did a lot of them right before the test, which kind of helped because it kind of forces you to take notes as well, which I don't think is like the best method of doing it, but it worked for me because rewriting things down is a big thing I do for studying for tests anyway. So it kind of just went hand in hand. I did half of them before, like while doing homework, and I did the other half like right before the test. And yeah, it's been really helpful. And with all that, with all this homework and stuff like that, after the homework has been turned in, he then releases the actual lecture part. So he encourages you to read the book first and then listen to his lectures. And his lectures add so much to the discussion. And not only that, but first of all, you can see the PowerPoint yourself separately. And then for the lectures, he actually separates the lecture into 6-minute videos, his own recording. And he doesn't he calls it his podcast format because that's essentially what it is. And so each video is him reading off the slides, but also like going in depth and like going into like the background of each psychologist that changed the face of psychology and things like that. And the fact that it's broken up to 6 minutes makes it very watchable and like listenable, and like you can take breaks in between. And it's just a lot easier to stay focused, especially for me. I have a lot of troubles with focus. I'm not diagnosed with ADHD, but something says. But so yeah, the way he's doing it has been really, really great, and I really appreciate it.
Cool. How about you, James? Asynchronous versus synchronous classes. How's that been?
Asynchronous classes for me is actually working a lot better than my synchronous classes, surprisingly. I'm usually a guy who likes to sit. I'm kind of old school. I like being physically in class and learning. That's for me. That's like the best way for me to learn. But it's been tough with doing synchronous classes. I've only have one synchronous class this semester, and it's pretty rough. It's a lot different than just being physically in class. That separation makes me feel like I'm not really there. Like it's harder for me. Like even though I'm physically talking with the teacher and everything, it's just not the same as being physically in class. And with the asynchronous classes, like Elle was saying, that you could pause them and it's easier for me to re-engage myself and with everything. And a lot of my professors have, with the asynchronous classes, with their videos, have been really in-depth in what they're talking about. For example, my CS class, like he would go along with the notes that he posts with them. And then he would talk about how each example or each programming example would run and function and explain how it does and encourages you to try it, test it out, see how it works for you.
That's cool. Yeah. I think we're on the same page. So I only have one synchronous class, and I'm having to take a total of 3 asynchronous because I generally like the idea of asynchronous classes just so I can go at my own pace, since I'm personally more of a planner, especially self-planner. So I recently had my first Zoom class for Com 5, and it was so boring. 3 hours. Like, the professor was great. She was super engaged, but just standing there at the last minute where all the information I needed to know was there about a project, I just had to stand there and go, she sees me. It's part of the participation. You have to have nonverbal communication. So I just stood there and like, and at the end of it, just went back to bed. And I think that's a good point for like a lot of students, that even though synchronous classes, people may assume, oh, it's just going to be like any other class. The issue is that we're now in a quarantine setting, and Zoom classes, like James said, kind of takes out a level of human connection. You're there physically, but mentally, you're just across another screen, and someone could be feeling the same way you do. It's not like in the middle of Zoom class, you'll be like, who's feeling tired? Yeah, me too. Yeah. So that's kind of how I've been feeling about synchronous classes. Asynchronous classes, again, I just like that better. I feel like I could plan. But recently, it's been kind of tiring because I feel like getting so used to it, sometimes you let yourself get a little too lenient. Like I told Al and James earlier that now when I listen to my lectures, often I'll lay in bed and just listen to it. And then once in a while, I'll get back up and type. I'll be like, oh, yeah, that's a good point. And I worry that, oh, I may forget. So, James and Al, with me as well, what are some tips you would give in terms of quarantine and learning in quarantine?
Well, I think the number one thing is know thyself, because I personally could never. Well, I actually did try what you did, taking notes in bed while listening to the lecture, and that just meant I fell asleep in the middle of the lecture because economics was not that interesting to me, and so I just didn't want to deal with it, and my brain shut off. So, knowing yourself and knowing how well you will study and like focus on things in certain settings will help a lot. Trying to do whatever you can in order to help yourself stay focused and also have more engagement with the material really helps. Like, I know that a lot of people like who are doing synchronous classes have a hard time with the webcam kind of lecture format because they get like either get self-conscious about like what they're doing on the screen, because unlike a classroom setting, the teacher doesn't have the option of just sweeping across the room and just kind of seeing you as a mass of students. With these cameras, they're literally zoomed in on the particular faces of everybody, and they can switch to them at will. And while they're probably not paying attention to you, I know of people who are very self-conscious about that fact. So like sometimes finding something in your room to play with your hands helps a lot. Like I either use this squishy ball that's on the other side of my room right now, or I literally just play with whatever's around. This is my wrist brace that I use when my wrist hurts, and it's got Velcro on it, so I can just play with it. And just because if you're doing something with your hands, the teacher's not going to care. And as long as that's keeping you focused on what's happening in the lecture, it's whatever.
How about you, James?
For me, for my synchronous classes, I'm kind of the opposite of you, Elle. I feel like I need something out of my hands, or like I just need to focus. For me, because my professor doesn't require you to have like a webcam on. It's just you need to be engaged. You just have to be there. So for me, well, my cam is usually just off anyways. But for me, I get distracted really easily. So for something where the professor isn't watching us, it's really easy for me to just pick up my phone and just, be on my phone and just listening to the lecture, but not be really engaged. And I start just drowning them out. And a lot of my classmates that I know, they just leave their speakers on. They'll either be in bed and they just knock out sometimes. I'd be like, hey, what'd you get for problem 5? And then I don't get a reply for like 30 minutes later. He's like, oh, my bad, I fell asleep. I'm like, okay.
What again? I counted 4 sheep before I was out.
I know, for me, it's very hard because we signed up for synchronous classes expecting to be engaged, but with everything going on, being that separation, you feel like, oh, I don't really have to be that engaged. I could just be listening in. But for some people like me, where you have to physically disengage yourself from other things. Like I can't watch TV. For me, it's harder because I share a room with my brother. He has the TV on. He's always playing games in here, or he'd be like messing around in my room, and it's hard for me to focus that way. So when it's time for me to take class, I ask him to leave the room. I usually turn my phone off, like I usually do when I'm at school. I turn my phone off, put it away, just so it's not a distraction.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's
Treating
smart.
Sorry, you go.
Quick question. I just follow up. Do instructors tell you to put all those devices and all those distractions away, or is this just like a personal choice that you're making?
This is a personal choice that I'm making.
Okay. Would you welcome the idea, like because I understand some folks learn completely differently, right? But I'm fearful of, like, if I'm lecturing and someone's like their screen's off, are they falling asleep? Like, I have no idea like what's on the other side, obviously, right? But you're all, like, sharing this really, really, really important feedback, and I'm just kind of curious, is that something that you think should be done, where the instructor's kind of like offering some, like, here's some behavioral tips as we engage in our synchronous course? Like, is that welcoming, or would you welcome those things? Would you think, I don't think you need to go to that extent, Eddie? Or I'm just kind of curious to know what your response would be. Like, if I said, here are 10 Zoom etiquette things to be mindful of, or a highly recommended best practices, right? You don't have to do it per se, but here's some best practices that I've gotten from feedback from other students to help better engage in a Zoom class that's synchronous. I don't know, thoughts?
For me personally, like, I give no offense to any professors that give me those advice, but I feel like it's kind of like off-putting. Like, we should already know those things. Personally, it's like, for me, it's like common sense. Like, don't try to engage yourself with the, like, focus on class. Don't, like, try to distract yourself. But some people need to do what they like Ella's saying. For her, it helps having, like, something to fidget around with. For them, that helps them focus, which to me, I don't mind that, but personally, that's how I learn a little bit differently. That's why I was like, do what you need to do. But for me, when someone tells me they should, like, recommend something to me, I feel like, okay, cool. It's like, but this is class, which is, I feel like we should already know sort of what's expected of it.
Well, James, I would say that you are like the model student. I would say the ideal kind of student that professors like Eddie's would want, that are active. Like, you've been in IVC longer than us, and I think you really, really know what works for you and what doesn't, and you know what will get you the best and most effective use out of your education. But for me, and I'm sure for a lot of first year or second year students, they're still figuring stuff out. And they're also probably still in denial about what causes them to be less effective. So personally, I wouldn't mind it at all getting tips and tricks from a professor about how to better engage. If it's not required, then I guess, yes, it can be like off-putting and annoying, and there'll definitely be students who just totally ignore it. But I think having it is better than not having it, because it just increases the chances that the kids who do care and do want to try to be more engaged and get the most out of their education, they'll try it and see if it works for them. And also, I actually don't think it's unreasonable to actually require for Zoom meetings to have your phone turned off. I think that's fairly reasonable, because that's like a standard classroom procedure anyway. So I don't think that'd be totally crazy to be like, hey, if we're in a Zoom meeting, you gotta turn off your notifications. Don't have your phone off. And also, something that's kind of been unofficially done in my voice class that I'm pretty sure like a lot of people have been doing, like, if you need to leave or like go to the bathroom or like do something else, like keep your camera on for like as long as you can, unless you're like driving or something like that. And if you need to leave, then either just turn off your camera or like go in the chat like I'm doing something else kind of thing. So that way you're not like totally trapped. If people need to use their phone to like answer an email or something like that, that could help. I don't know. But yeah, that's just how I think about it.
Yeah. I was going to say, to add on that, for especially college, that the students are so diverse. They're not like us, where they're just incoming freshmen from high school and like they kind of have been used to the system and like the patterns. Some people have like come from different countries and aren't used to this type of, I guess, more freer way of learning, like where they could be a little more comfortable sharing their opinions, as well as people who aren't used to the technology in Zoom. So I also agree, like, yeah, like let's add in some tips and some requirements. But I know on the other hand, some people have that mindset that there's their way of learning. Like, hey, like I want to learn this way. Like I said, the Zoom class I learned, if I personally had maybe some tips, it would help. But I think at the same time, my tip would be before a Zoom class, maybe 10 minutes before. If you like this, maybe take a quick nap with the timer, or maybe go outside, get some fresh air, just something that can like get your brain working. But I know the downsides to those tips as well. Maybe that like you can't go outside, or that 10-minute nap suddenly becomes, oops, I missed class. And like that's how it works. So I'm just saying that find what works for you. But I think maybe suggesting it to professor, like asking professors, hey, like what would you suggest? Because I think professors, on the other hand, who are just getting used to this Zoom like environment, like, you know, Eddie, you're just trying to like find ways to get engaged with your students. They may not know as well. They may ask students instead, hey students, like what are ways you would be more engaged? And maybe some forum or some way to communicate that would definitely improve online learning. But it's all a process. I think the biggest tip I could give myself is don't put too much pressure if you don't get it right the first time. If you let yourself know you can make mistakes and take notes and reflect on that, it definitely helps. And another tip would be, I don't know, I'm not someone who's like all hands out or hands off when it comes to like Zoom. I personally like to have a notepad and it's just there. So then when I'm feeling like I'm not engaged, I'll do two things. Either I'll write notes, like on an important thing, I'm like, okay, I'll forget, or I'll doodle, because doodling helps me. And like, at least my brain is engaged some way. But there are pros and cons to everything. And I think that's kind of the summary of my point of view. But yeah, that's that.
I 100% do the doodling thing. I have defaced every single piece of paper that's been put in front of me since I was 3, consistently. And like to the point where like teachers would, like in elementary school, would try to get me to stop and say you can't do it. But if they take away the paper, I'm just gonna draw on the desk. Like I don't like it's a freaking, I don't know, it's like a tick. Like if there's a piece of paper, something drawable, and I have something to draw with, I need to do something. Even just making random squiggles and like repeating squares. It's just very soothing, and like kind of helps like isolate one section of the brain that's like more nervous or like wants to go other places, but still keeping focus on like the audio input. I don't know, that's just how my brain works. And also, I have to say, not to dog anybody who wants to take naps before a thing, but just the way you presented that idea, Charlize, made it absolutely sound like a preschool like teacher. Like, okay, class, right now we're gonna have nap time, and then later you can go outside.
Oh, well, it works. I mean, that's probably why they say that. So
it does. You're right.
I will add one thing. My professor in writing, in the beginning, she actually said there's a study that if you doodle during class, it actually helps you. It actually gets you more engaged. And ever since I learned that, I was like, yes. And like in that class particularly, it definitely helped. But again, there are limits. Like when you feel like at the end of the day, you're on your like phone or you're doing something that you know you shouldn't do, and like you felt like you didn't retain something, take notice of that. Don't ignore it and be like, okay, well, that's like one time, not like it's gonna happen again. It will happen again. It like, especially with the phones. And like there's a big, I guess, synchronous classes kind of challenges. I don't know where I'm going with this, but like I feel like it challenges the way that people think we're supposed to learn. Like, you know, people already don't like classes in general. And I think there's a point to that now we're taking the foundation into online meeting. And what actually got people engaged wasn't the way you learn, like the structure, but actually the human connection. That once that was taken away, people were now even less engaged. And now, like, I don't know where I was going with that, but like I feel like that's a good point to reach out to people, that like we're all feeling some sort of lack of human connection that we all long for, and just know we're all in it together. So yeah.
So I know. Like, if we want to just wrap up this particular topic, if I could just kind of like say a few things. Like, thank you so much for sharing. I think that, you know, you're just providing. I know you're providing me with some really useful information. You know, and I think you're providing other students with useful information. And I think, you know, if other colleagues of mine faculty administrators and even staff members like hear what you're saying, I think that might help kind of like help prime people for making that jump into like, online classes. And that's the thing, because, now some folks have gone back to school, right? We know that in certain schools at Irvine Unified School District, Tustin Unified School District, even Saddleback Valley, where my kid's at, some folks have gone back. So, but higher ed, we're still in Zoom land. Right now we're anticipating we're going to stay in Zoom, maybe all the way to, for sure, maybe summer. So either summer or fall, there may be that switch to come back. But, I think because distance education was kind of forced upon us with COVID, I don't think Zoom classes or online classes are going to go away. I think, if anything, it's going to, like you said, I think it was Charlize, the notion of rethinking on how we teach people and how we share content, how we, try to measure particular learning outcomes and hit core concepts and make sure that we're doing all the things that we should be doing in a classroom. And, knowing that some folks need to be fidgeting or doodling, or some folks need to have these different particular practices to potentially get really engaged. I think if anything, it just warrants, and I'm sure there's studies out there, but this would be a conversation for our institutional research department, but just ways of surveying, student experience. And, what are some of the engagement practices that people would like to see happen in their course? Right. I can't imagine if you go to a 3-hour synchronous class and there's no group interaction whatsoever, and you're expected to hear 3 hours of lecture. I can't imagine what that would be like. I mean, I can, because I've lived the personal life of that, but add Zoom to that. Oh my goodness. I can't, we talk about Zoom fatigue all the time too. So, but I'm a firm believer of the 15 to 20 minute change up. Every 15 to 20 minutes, you should be physically doing something different than what you were doing in your class, especially if you're meeting synchronously. So anyways.